47th floor, Kane Global Enterprises, Manhattan. A single phone call had just jeopardized everything. CEO Alexander Kane stood motionless at the edge of his glass-walled office, eyes fixed on the street below, where 3 sleek black cars pulled up to the curb. The Chinese tech delegation had arrived, precisely on schedule. "Sir, the translator just canceled," Claire Whitmore said, phone trembling in her hand. "Family emergency. No replacements available. Not for a meeting this size." Alexander turned sharply, panic creeping into his usually unreadable face. This deal, $200 million, years in the making, relied on flawless communication. No apps, no guesswork. The delegation valued precision, protocol, and professionalism. A single misstep could unravel it all. Behind them, someone cleared her throat. I speak fluent Mandarin." The voice was quiet, almost unsure. They turned to see Imani Brooks, in a navy blue janitorial uniform, clutching a cleaning cloth, standing near the doorway. She was 28, invisible until now. Claire blinked, then laughed under her breath. "Oh, come on." Alexander didn't laugh. He studied Imani with sharp eyes, noting the calm in her voice, an odd steadiness for someone offering to step into a global negotiation. "You've got 20 minutes, he said. "Go change. Meet me in the conference room." Claire's mouth dropped open, but Alexander had already turned away. The room had shifted, and no one knew what was coming next. 3 years earlier, before the janitor's uniform, before the elevator keys that only worked on cleaning shifts, Imani Brooks sat in a lecture hall at Howard University, her fingers dancing across Mandarin and Cantonese textbooks. She was 2 semesters away from her degree in Oriental linguistics, top of her class, sharp, focused, driven by something more than ambition. Her mother's health changed all of that. Type 2 diabetes turned routine into crisis. Bills stacked, higher than textbooks. The scholarship covered tuition, but not rent, not insulin, not the food her mother needed to survive. So Imani packed her books, withdrew from Howard, and moved back to Brooklyn. She took the first job that would not ask for a resume. Kane Global Enterprises had offered her a janitorial position on the night shift, executive floor maintenance. They called it polishing glass tables, scrubbing marble floors, emptying bins of confidential documents. The title meant little, but the location meant everything. She worked in silence on the 47th floor, the same floor where billion-dollar deals were signed, where strategy was whispered behind thick doors and tinted glass. The irony was painful. Imani understood every language spoken in those rooms: Mandarin, Cantonese, Taiwanese, French, even snippets of German. But no one ever asked. No one looked twice. The uniform made her invisible, and that was exactly what she needed to at first. It was about survival. But within weeks, she began to listen. She was always quiet, always respectful, always present, but her mind was never on the mop. She memorized which executives repeated talking points and which invented them on the spot. She noted who watched the numbers and who just watched themselves in the reflection of the boardroom glass. She listened to Claire Whitmore, the company's polished VP of International Affairs, speak with venom behind smiles, especially when it came to younger women or anyone who did not fit the image. One night, 6 months into the job, Imani overheard Claire in the executive restroom. She was crying softly into her phone, telling someone, "That black girl keeps hanging around the boardroom. I swear, she listens like she belongs in there." Imani was in the next stall, standing on the toilet so her feet would not show. She never forgot that sentence. She did not say anything. She never did. That was her strength. Every night she arrived at 6 p.m. and cleaned until 2 a.m. But between emptying bins and dusting shelves, she was reading the strategy memos left out on desks. She noticed which firms Kane Global pursued and which they avoided. She saw the contract drafts that were left open on screens, and sometimes even the red-line versions that revealed secrets no one else noticed. And she studied Claire's power moves, her lies, her shortcuts, her fear of being irrelevant. Imani knew the whole company saw her as furniture. But furniture has eyes and ears. There were times when it hurt, when executives would talk about her while she was still in the room, assuming she did not understand a word. They called her that girl from facilities. They made jokes about her smell when she came in from the rain. One analyst once asked her to warm up his coffee because she was already holding a rag, but she never reacted. Instead, she bought a second-hand laptop and began building a folder, one for emails left open, one for recordings captured by accident through the office security feed, one for screenshots, and one she labeled Future. 3 years passed, and while everyone else climbed the corporate ladder by stepping on those beneath them, Imani took notes. She did not plan on being a hero. She just refused to stay invisible forever. Kane Global Enterprises conference room. 20 minutes later, the atmosphere was ice and marble as Imani Brooks stepped back into the room, not in her uniform, but in a borrowed black dress from the receptionist and a pair of low heels that pinched her toes. Her hair was pulled into a sleek bun, and she carried a modest notepad in one hand. Like any other executive preparing for high-stakes negotiation, the change was jarring. Conversations halted. Eyes turned. Thomas Granger, the CFO, muttered under his breath, "Is that really the same girl who mops the hallways?" Claire Whitmore did not bother to whisper. Leaning close to a junior associate, she said with a smirk, "You can polish a rock, but it is still a rock." Imani heard every word. She did not blink. Inside the gleaming glass-walled conference room, the Chinese delegation had already taken their seats. 5 representatives, led by Mr. Liang, sat neatly, their posture composed, their expressions neutral as they admired the view of the city skyline. Alexander Kane stood at the head of the table, adjusting his cufflinks. "Gentlemen," he began, his voice even, "thank you for your patience. Allow me to introduce Imani Brooks, our international consultant for Mandarin and Southeast Asian markets. She will be facilitating today's discussion." There was a pause. Then Mr. Liang stood slightly, gave Imani a respectful nod. She returned the gesture with a subtle bow, then spoke fluently in Mandarin. "It is an honor to welcome you. We admire your punctuality and look forward to a fruitful partnership." A spark passed through Mr. Liang's eyes, the subtle kind of surprise that only a native speaker could invoke. The tone was respectful, the dialect precise, the cultural cadence perfect. For the first 15 minutes, Imani translated with surgical precision. She shifted between Mandarin and English seamlessly, capturing not just words but subtleties. A light joke about traffic that made the delegates laugh, a reference to Chinese lunar traditions that earned approving nods. The meeting was moving like water. Even Alexander looked relieved. Then came Claire, leaning forward with a wide, performative smile. She interrupted in the middle of a transition. "Before we go too far," she said sweetly, "I think it would be inspiring to share Imani's journey with our guests." Alexander glanced at her sharply, but Claire continued. "Imani started in a very different role here. You see," she laughed, "just 3 years ago, she was part of our janitorial team. And now, look at her, quite the Cinderella story, wouldn't you agree?" The silence hit like a dropped glass. Imani's spine straightened. Her jaw did not move, but her breath did. Mr. Liang blinked. His eyes, once warm, shifted slightly, not to judgment, but to calculation. Cultural decorum in China held hierarchy sacred. Appearances mattered. The person translating was often seen as holding authority in the room. That illusion had just shattered. Imani kept translating, but she felt the room grow colder. Her words still flowed, but now she was no longer just a voice. She was a question mark. Claire leaned back in her chair, clearly satisfied with the tension now hanging above them. Alexander cleared his throat and tried to recover. What Claire meant to say, he began, is that we value talent wherever we find it, regardless of background. Mr. Liang nodded politely, but the spark was gone. For the next 10 minutes, Imani translated through invisible static. She could feel the way the glances shifted. She could feel the doubt settling in. She had gone from consultant to curiosity. And Claire simply smiled, sipping her water like it was champagne. But what no one saw, what Claire especially failed to see, was the look in Imani's eyes. Not shame, not fear, calculation. Because while they were watching her facade crack, Imani was already preparing her next move. Post-meeting evening at Kane Global Enterprises, the meeting ended without a clear decision. The energy in the room, once warm and filled with potential, now felt uncertain, strained. The Chinese delegation thanked everyone politely and left without signing anything. Their handshakes were firm but cool. Mr. Liang offered Imani a nod, but it no longer held the quiet respect it had earlier. Imani felt the shift deep in her chest. She walked slowly back to the service elevator, her heels clicking softly down the hallway. The dress, once elegant, now felt like a costume. Her shoulders were straight, but inside, something stung. She had made one mistake. Not with language, not with etiquette, but by letting her title speak before her work. In Mandarin culture, power is tied to position. Appearance matters. When Claire had pointed out that Imani was once a janitor, it had not just embarrassed her, it had changed how the delegation saw her. Not as a professional, but as a novelty. A story. Something to be admired from afar, but not trusted with real authority. That night, Imani sat alone in the employee break room. The building was mostly empty. Cleaning crews moved through the lower floors. But she stayed quiet, her thoughts loud. Claire had won, for now, and the way she smiled during the meeting, Imani knew it was not by accident. That smile had history. 3 years ago, on Imani's third night on the job, she had entered the executive restroom just after Claire had finished a phone call. Claire looked her up and down, scoffed, and said, "If we keep letting people like this clean our floors, we might as well let them run the board meetings." She had laughed. Imani had not. That night, she had gone home and started a new folder on her old laptop, documentation. Over the next 3 years, that folder grew. Photos of spreadsheets left open on desks. Emails left on screen when executives stepped out. Notes slipped into recycling bins, shredded but not well enough. Casual hallway conversations captured on voice memos. Even the office security cameras had audio feeds on executive floors, feeds no one bothered to monitor unless something went wrong. And Imani? She was always there, always invisible. People said things in front of her like she was furniture. They gossiped about company takeovers. They bragged about sabotaging co-workers. They laughed at HR rules they had no intention of following. Claire especially liked to vent in public spaces, offices, lounges, even elevators. Diversity hires slow everything down. She once told another VP, "We pretend to be inclusive, but when it comes to real decisions, we all know who belongs and who does not." Imani had copied that conversation into a protected file, saved both the audio and the date. She never planned to use it. Not unless she had to. Now she had to. Claire had crossed the line, not just by humiliating her, but by risking the company's future out of pride. That deal with the Chinese partners was worth $200 million. And Claire would rather destroy it than allow someone like Imani to succeed in front of her. Imani looked at her reflection in the break room window. She was no longer the girl who scrubbed marble floors while executives talked down to her. She had evidence. She had the truth. And now, for the first time, she had the courage to use it. The next morning, she would not come to work in a janitor's uniform. She would wear the gray suit she had purchased the night before, using the signing bonus the Chinese delegation had given her in private, because, despite the awkward end to the meeting, they did believe in her skills. They had even offered to help. Claire thought she was clever, but what she did not realize was that Imani had been preparing for this moment for 3 years. Kane Global Enterprises Executive Boardroom. The next morning, the atmosphere inside the executive boardroom felt heavy, as if the air itself understood that something irreversible was about to happen. That a rare emergency meeting had been called by Alexander Kane just hours after he received a formal complaint from the Chinese delegation. The message was clear. Serious contractual irregularities had been discovered, and if not addressed immediately, the deal would be withdrawn, along with a possible federal investigation. Around the long marble table sat the entire board, 8 of the most powerful people in the company, including Mr. Harris, a reserved senior director who rarely spoke unless absolutely necessary. The door opened sharply. Claire Whitmore entered in a striking crimson suit, her heels clicking confidently against the polished floor. Her lipstick matched her mood, bold and certain. She scanned the room, then addressed the board without waiting for permission. "Well," she began, her voice smooth and composed, "I assume this meeting is about yesterday's unfortunate fiasco. As I warned before, placing someone unqualified in a negotiation of this scale was reckless. And now it seems we are facing the consequences." No one responded. Claire took that as silent agreement and moved to take her usual seat at the table. But then, without warning, the door opened again, quietly this time. Imani Brooks stepped in, wearing a tailored gray suit, minimal jewelry, and a calm expression that was harder than steel. She carried a slim leather briefcase and her own laptop. She did not wait to be invited. She walked directly to the seat beside Alexander Kane and placed her materials down with quiet precision. "Apologies for being late," Imani said evenly. "I was compiling a few documents I believe the board should see." Claire's lips twitched in irritation. "Excuse me," she said, her tone sharp. "Why is she here?" "This is an executive meeting." "She is here," Alexander replied coolly, "because the Chinese delegation specifically requested her presence to clarify the concerns they raised." Claire stiffened, but said nothing. Imani opened her laptop. With a few keystrokes, she connected to the main screen. The first document projected was an internal email, sent from Claire to an outside client 6 months ago. "This email," Imani said, "contains confidential bidding information from one of our direct competitors, Johnson & Stone, shared illegally." The room fell silent. Claire opened her mouth, but Imani did not stop. "The next file," she continued, "contains inflated project costs deliberately assigned to departments managed by Black and Latino employees, projects that were then marked for cancellation due to incompetence." A spreadsheet appeared on screen, followed by cross-referenced emails. Dates, names, red flags highlighted in yellow. Claire's smile was gone. "That is a manipulation of context," she said quickly. "There is no proof that Imani pressed play on an audio file. Claire's voice came through the speakers. "We cannot allow these kinds of people to think they belong in executive boardrooms. They lower the entire tone of the company." Claire's face turned pale. "That recording," Imani said calmly, "was captured by the company's own hallway surveillance system 8 months ago." Claire looked around the room. The eyes that met hers were no longer supportive. They were cold. "Calculating." Mr. Harris leaned forward. His voice, rarely heard, cut through the silence. "Ms. Whitmore," he said, "are you confirming that you instructed our HR department to filter out resumes with ethnic-sounding names?" Claire stammered. "That is being taken out of context. I was under pressure to maintain company image, and company image," Imani interrupted, softly, "should reflect integrity, not prejudice." Alexander Kane turned to Claire. His voice was flat. "You have 30 seconds to explain why you should not be fired for cause and reported to the Federal Trade Commission." Claire's mouth opened, but no words came out. She turned to the other board members, searching for an ally. There were none. "You are making a terrible mistake," she whispered. "She is just a resentful cleaning lady who, Alexander cut in, "is our new director of international strategy. And you are fired." The silence that followed was brutal. Claire stood frozen, swaying slightly as the weight of her fall settled in. "Your access will be revoked immediately," Mr. Harris added. "Security will escort you from the building." "And Claire," Alexander said, pausing just long enough, "the documents will be forwarded to the federal authorities. This is no longer just a company issue." As the guards arrived, Claire cast one final look at Imani, filled with venom and disbelief. "You may have won today," she hissed, "but you are still what you have always been." Imani met her gaze calmly. "You are right," she replied. "I have always been someone who listens, observes, and waits. The only difference now is that I am finally where I belong." 6 months later, Kane Global Enterprises, 38th floor. The skyline of Manhattan stretched wide behind Imani Brooks as she stood in her corner office, floor-to-ceiling windows casting sunlight across her sleek glass desk. Now covered in contracts written in Mandarin, Korean, and Cantonese. 6 months had passed since the boardroom showdown. 6 months since Claire Whitmore fell, and Imani rose. She had been officially named Director of International Strategy within a week of the Chinese delegation's request. The news spread like wildfire across the business world. Headlines called her the invisible strategist, the woman who had observed in silence and then flipped the script on corporate prejudice in one unforgettable morning. Since then, Imani had signed over $400 million in new deals across Asia, China, South Korea, and Singapore included. Kane Global's international profile had tripled in value, and even Forbes had taken notice. A week earlier, they named her one of America's most influential young executives. Her new annual salary, $300,000. her first decision after the promotion. Move her mother into a private care facility specializing in diabetic treatment. Fully paid, no wait lists, no stress. Her mother had wept quietly on the phone, repeating one line over and over. "You were never invisible to me." Imani also completed her master's in global business through an executive program at Columbia University, graduating top of her cohort. She wore her cap and gown with pride, walking across that stage not as a statistic, but as a survivor. But perhaps her most personal triumph came the day she returned to Howard University, her alma mater, standing at the podium before 500 students in the auditorium where she had once dreamed of changing the world. Imani announced the launch of the Brooks Scholarship Fund, a $500,000 initiative designed to support students of color who had been forced to pause their studies due to family or financial hardship. "No one," she said into the microphone, "should have to choose between their dreams and their survival." The audience rose in a standing ovation. Some students cried. Professors hugged one another. Imani had done more than return. She had brought reinforcements. Meanwhile, across town in a cramped apartment in Queens, Claire Whitmore sat hunched over her kitchen table, staring at another job rejection email. Her name was now flagged in HR systems across dozens of companies, tied to a public scandal that had rocked the industry. The federal discrimination probe resulted in a $50,000 personal fine, a 5-year executive ban from any company with government contracts, and a front-page feature in Business Week under the headline, "When Arrogance Becomes a Liability." The Claire Whitmore story. Claire's old condo in Manhattan had been repossessed. Therapy bills, legal costs, and unpaid debts cluttered her mailbox. That morning, her laptop screen glowed with an article. Imani Brooks, from cleaning carts to corporate command. Her photo smiling next to South Korean executives, eyes focused, presence undeniable. Claire closed the laptop gently. She did not cry this time. She had already spent months doing that. What she felt now was quieter, heavier. For the first time in years, she felt something that looked a lot like regret. The hallway was quiet that afternoon as Imani Brooks walked past the framed photographs of Kane Global's top international deals, many of which now bore her signature. She paused just outside the boardroom, where 6 months ago, she had connected her laptop and changed the course of her life. Now, she returned not with a cleaning cart, but with 5 new interns, young, wide-eyed professionals from underrepresented communities. Each one had shown potential, drive, and heart. Qualities that Imani knew better than anyone could not be found on a resume.as. She walked them through the 38th floor. She stopped outside her own office. Her name was engraved in glass. Imani Brooks, Director of International Strategy. "This used to be the hallway I mopped every evening," she told them with a soft smile. "No one saw me, but I was always watching, always learning." Inside, her interns asked questions about strategy, about leadership, about what had really happened between her and Claire Whitmore. One brave intern asked what everyone else was too nervous to say. "Why did you not destroy her more publicly? You had the power." Imani leaned back in her chair and looked out over the skyline. "Because the best revenge is not destruction," she said slowly. "It is becoming everything they said you could not." Claire already destroyed herself. "I just made sure the truth had a microphone." Later that evening, Imani stood alone by the large window in her office. The city lights blinked beneath her like stars. She remembered the nights she used to leave through the back service elevator, too tired to dream, too invisible to be acknowledged. But invisibility had been her greatest asset, a disguise no one feared, a silence no one questioned. And now, every voice in the building spoke her name with respect. She had been invisible, but invisibility was just a disguise for genius. And now, the whole world could see it.